What's up, guys? So you're probably already familiar that there's many types of living things on the world. So there's plants, there's animals, there's you, maybe you're an animal, hayop ka, stuff like that. But basically, if you look at plants, like the trees outside, or an indoor plant you might have, or a cactus or something, and you compare it to yourself, it's hard to imagine that you and that plant would be made of the same thing, right? They're so different from each other, and yet they're both living things made up of the same type of thing, same building block. Back in the day, they didn't know about this, and so it became a groundbreaking discovery when they formulated the cell theory. My name is Sir Ramon, and this is Science with Sir Mon. Let's get right into it. So first, what are these things on the left? What do you think it is? It's green, it's blocky, it's probably plant cells. So this is an image of plants. So a plant is made up of cells. What about these? You're probably familiar with what these are. These are your erythrocytes, your red blood cells, and of course, that's carried by animals. So animals, we can easily say, are made up of cells. Again, it's easy for us now because, we've already taken it up in grade school, but back then, when they didn't know any better, they didn't know that plants and animals were part of the same big overarching structure. Okay? And what tied it together is the cell theory. Okay? And it has three basic tenets made by three proponents. So let's get into it. First guy. This guy is named Matthias Schleiden. I can't pronounce his name very well, but that's the spelling. So he's a botanist. He likes plants. Look at him go. He's even looking at the plant picture right now. So he studied plants and he realized that all plants and their parts must be made up of cells or products of cells. So take note of that. He concluded that plants are cells. Next, we have Theodor Schwann. He's a physiologist, meaning he studies the form and the function of different parts of animals. And he concluded that animals and their parts must be made up of cells or products of cells. You get where this is going? Hey, so these dudes knew each other, and it's quite a story. So they met at a party, right? So they met at a party. It's like Theodor Schwann and then Matthias Schleiden. So they're like at the party for nerds and stuff. And they're comparing their notes, comparing their images, and then they realized that their images, for example, this one and this one, they realized that they had common structures. Specifically, why do both of them have nuclei? So they saw that there's a nucleus or a big fat round thing in both plants and in animals. So they're like, wait a minute, kapeng mainit, okay? If there's something in common here, there must be something that we can see or do. So they went to the lab together. They left the party together. They took out their microscopes and they looked closely at each other's specimens. And they concluded that yes, plants and animals must be made of the same thing. They're made up of cells. And so they made the first two tenets of the cell theory. First, all organisms are composed of cells. And second, the cell is the fundamental unit of life. This was groundbreaking because nobody thought that plants and animals would be, made of the same stuff. It's just unthinkable. But where do new cells come from? This was a big question when they put forth these first two tenets. They're like, well, we don't know where they come from. Let's just say they appear out of nowhere. So this is the theory of spontaneous generation. So spontaneous generation is an early theory of the origins of life, that cells come from non-living matter. This lady is Aphrodite. She came from the foam of the sea, at least if that's one of the origin stories for Aphrodite. So living thing from non-living thing. Kind of wild, if you ask me. So that was disproven, and eventually this guy came up, Rudolf Virchow. He's a pathologist, meaning he studies diseases and stuff. And he concluded that cells must come from pre-existing cells. He made a Latin maxim, omnis cellula e cellula, which just says that all cells are from cells. But wait, did he really discover it? Huh? See, some historians doubt that Virchow actually discovered it because of some sketchy business. As we, figured out from before with Newton and Hooke, science is always involved in sketchy business. So Virchow seems to have plagiarized his work from this guy, Robert Remak. So this guy is the OG. He studied chicken embryo red blood cells and found them at different stages of division. And he figured out that cells come from the division of cells. This was extremely groundbreaking, but nobody paid him any attention. Why? Because he was a Jew. Alright, there was racism back in the day as well, and it got in the way of progress. It sucks. Okay? So again, in our exams, in our quizzes, especially entrance exams, if you're asked who said omnis cellula est cellula, you answer Rudolf Virchow. But, okay, so you remember Rudolf Virchow, but you remember in your heart that it was Robert Remak who actually did the hard research of it all. Okay? Alright, so your classical cell theory has three tenets. These are the three. All organisms are cells. The cell is the fundamental unit of life, and all cells must come from pre-existing cells. There is a modern cell theory which has additional tenets, but this is the OG and what we should memorize. And these are the three proponents. So Schleiden-Schwann concluded that plants and animals are made up of cells, while Virchow made the maxim omnis cellula est cellula. But are plants and animals all there is? Are they really the only type of living thing? So there are other types of living things, such as this thing. So it looks like a Twinkie bar that's been cut in half, or what's this, fudgy bar with a cream in the middle. But this is actually a prokaryote. So prokaryotes, it means before nucleus. They're usually single-celled organisms, and they can be divided into two, bacteria and archaea. Now the weird thing is that archaeons, even though they look like bacteria, they're actually genetically more related to eukaryotes. Wild, right? Archaeons are extremophiles. They tend to live in extreme conditions like extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme salt. Alright? So again, extremes. So archaeons look like bacteria, but if you look at the tree of life and how things branch off from each other, okay, your archaeons branched off with a common ancestor with eukaryotes, not with bacteria. Okay? So again, it's more closely related to us than to bacteria. Weird. If we go to eukaryotes though, the ones with a true nucleus, again, eukaryote means true nucleus, we have three main types. We have the plants, the animals, and the fungi. Okay? So again, plants, animals, and fungi. Where are we there? We're not plants. Are we animals or fungi? Hey, amag ka ba? Obviously not. So the only conclusion is hayop ka. We're animals. So humans are under animals. Now with these categories, before, we weren't able to figure out that plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and archaeons are part of the same overarching unity of life. They used to be in different categories of study. But because of the cell theory, we got a vision of clarity about them. But what about viruses? Like the coronavirus, are they alive? So if we look at the characteristics of life, right? These are the 7. So they may have to be made of cells. They have different levels of organization, like organs and tissues. They use energy, so on and so forth. If we make a checklist of this, we'll find that your viruses don't make the cut. Sad, sad virus over there. Okay? So viruses cannot maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis means steady state. So it means that you're making sure that the conditions of your body are just the right Goldilocks level, okay, not too hot, not too cold, stuff like that. So viruses can't do that on their own. They can't reproduce very well on their own. It's kind of sketchy. They don't grow at all. It's kind of sketchy how they use energy and stuff like that. So they're not displaying all the characteristics of life. So for those that are alive, these things used to be in different branches of science, but due to the cell theory, now we have biology at large. Okay? So without the cell theory, we wouldn't have one big biology subject. Okay? Thank you, cell theory. I have a job. So we owe it to these people who unified biology. Matthias, Theodore, Rudolf, not Rudolf, he plagiarized, and Robert Remak. Okay? So, pro tip, one way to remember that Theodore Schwann is about animals. Schwann kind of looks like swan, which is an animal. Fun, right? So next we have to ask ourselves, how big can cells get? Like, we know that they can be small, but then how big? What's the max cell size? So the smallest cell is from the genus Mycoplasma. They're less than 1 micrometer large. It's wild. It's very difficult to see them. The largest single-celled organism is the Caulerpa genus. It's actually the lato. There's this food that we have commonly in our cuisine, lato, or sea grapes. So these are a special type of algae. Each algae frond is one cell. Can you believe that? A 3-meter long cell, one thing. Extremely large. Okay? So again, it goes from small to large. So what the heck determines the size of cells? I thought they were just small. What do they need to consider? So if you did your activity, your warm-up activity, you should already know that we need surface area. Okay? So back to physics. Surface area is just, how much skin something has. Okay? And the more skin something has, the more it can exchange with its environment. Okay, so the takeaway is that more surface area means better exchange. Now, volume is also important for cells because cells need enough space inside them to have cellular structures that can process things. So more volume means more processing power, but it also means there's more maintenance costs. Okay, so there has to be a balance. Enough surface area to exchange materials with the environment and enough volume to process these materials. Okay, so in order to strike a good balance between maintenance costs and exchange rate, what we ideally want is a high ratio of surface area to a low amount of volume. So better exchange for low maintenance costs. Okay, just enough volume to process what it needs to process. All right. So the takeaway here is that if you have the same volume cube, so in the left side it's just one big fat cell. So that means that it has the surface area of that cube is just 5,400 micrometers squared. But if you have many cells, so many small cells of the same volume, it has more surface area between these cells. Okay? Each of those extra sides inside the middle of this cube owes to more total surface area. So that the total surface area is 16,200. More than it's like almost thrice the processing power, or no, what is it? It's exactly thrice the processing power with the same thrice the surface area, meaning thrice the exchange rate with the same amount of processing power. And so, smaller cells tend to have more efficient surface area to volume ratio. That's why cells are small. But what about Caulerpa? It's so big. So why? How? If you look at the shape of Caulerpa, it's not just one circle cell or one cube cell. It has a unique shape. So cell shape can actually help maximize surface area and help cells perform their specific functions better. So the general shapes of cells are these three. We have the sphere, we have the cube, and we have the filament. Your spheres maximize volume. They have high processing power, but very low exchange efficiency. However, they're also very easy to form. It's like naturally things tend to want to be spheres anyway. Okay, that's why we have planets the shape of spheres and stuff like that. Okay? Next, we have cubes. They're great for packing things together. So they're great for packing. They're like boxes, efficient for space, and they also still have good volume. Okay? So spheres have better volume with the same amount of surface area material. So they're better if you want to maximize volume. But cubes are better for good volume. However, there's a special shape that's better than cubes for packing. The special shape for your epithelial cells, some of your epithelial cells. So try to search the term scutoid, S-C-U-T-O-I-D. So that's cutting edge research around 2018, I think it was published. Scutoids are a weird ass it's like a hexagon and a pentagon that was morphed together, and supposedly that's even better for packing than cubes. Wild, right? Anyway. Of course, finally we have the filaments. They maximize surface area, and the reason for that is because they're like wires. So they're best for exchange, but they have terrible volume. But that's okay if you want to have less maintenance costs. So again, one example of a filamentous surface area, filamentous shape is Caulerpa. Okay? If we go back to the image of Caulerpa, it looks like this. It looks like filaments. It has lots of surface area, even though it has minimal volume. So again, the shape helps with the surface area to volume ratio. So the takeaway, life starts very small. We even need special instruments to see examples of life like the flea and the animalcules and mycoplasma. And yet, big or small, understanding life goes a long way towards solving today's problems. Food, like the kaulerpa, stuff like how cells divide, and of course, even though it's not a living thing, viruses infect living things. And so understanding things that are microscopic and tiny allows us to solve today's problems. Again, it's the little things that matter, right? If you have questions, you can hit me up in Edmodo or through social media. My name is Sir Ramon, and we are done with this week's topic. I'll see you guys in the next video.